called My Body, My Spirit. I'm going to start it off by introducing myself. My name is USAThe, and this is my brother.
Hi, I'm Caught in the Act. And then we also have with us.
Is that me? I can't see if you're pointing to the screen.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know where I'm pointing either.
Hi, everyone. My name is King Lotus Boy. I use he, him, zzier, and they, them pronouns.
Woo! And we'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion. And I think we should just get right into it. I'm going to open us up with our first question and talking about spirituality. Kitean and Lotus, I'm going to ask this of both of you. What was your spiritual upbringing and how has this impacted your drag?
Lotus, do you want to answer first?
Not really, but I can.
I will if you don't. I just wanted to
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you want to go first, that would be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, no worries. So my upbringing is a little bit different. I don't know if anybody has heard of the BofA faith, but it is kind of a newer religion. A lot of people don't really know of it, but that is my background. That and also a open
called My Body, My Spirit. I'm going to start it off by introducing myself. My name is USAThe, and this is my brother.
Hi, I'm Caught in the Act. And then we also have with us.
Is that me? I can't see if you're pointing to the screen.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know where I'm pointing either.
Hi, everyone. My name is King Lotus Boy. I use he, him, zzier, and they, them pronouns.
Woo! And we'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion. And I think we should just get right into it. I'm going to open us up with our first question and talking about spirituality. Kitean and Lotus, I'm going to ask this of both of you. What was your spiritual upbringing and how has this impacted your drag?
Lotus, do you want to answer first?
Not really, but I can.
I will if you don't. I just wanted to
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you want to go first, that would be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, no worries. So my upbringing is a little bit different. I don't know if anybody has heard of the BofA faith, but it is kind of a newer religion. A lot of people don't really know of it, but that is my background. That and also a open Lakota path as well. So in one area, in the Baha'i area, being non-binary and kind of on the gender spectrum wasn't so welcoming, whereas the Lakota path, it was very welcoming. And I found a lot of my chosen family and spiritual family down that path. And I was very lucky to be able to have an openness when it comes to being able to express and kind of develop my spirituality. And that's kind of how I am with drag. I kind of leave everything open. I try not to put myself in a box and try to be as gentle and loving and kind as possible and take the good values that I've learned from all of my upbringings into my drag character as well, and not just keeping it at home, but taking kind of those practices, those values onto the stage with me as well.
Thanks for sharing. That was really beautiful. I can see the connection between your upbringing and your drag. I was raised as Christian, and I do not identify or relate or associate with Christianity anymore. And although I was raised in a relatively progressive church, I still found myself when I was younger and thought that I really believed in the Christian God. I just felt really deeply in my body, right? Because we're talking about our body and our spirit, just like this sense of like not fitting and not belonging. And it was before I had the language to describe my queerness and my transness and my expansiveness. But all I knew was that this doesn't really feel right, or I'm trying to connect to the words that you're saying. I'm trying to see and say that these things are true to me, but it didn't really feel true. And although many people have found love and joy and care and, personal resonance with Christianity, that was not my experience. And I firmly believe that, this religion has harmed and really, really impacted a lot of people negatively. Christianity is a huge part of colonialism and the, continued oppression of a lot of Indigenous and marginalized groups. And I think it's very important to be critical about these ideas that we kind of inherit from the way that we're brought up with religion, even if we never were explicitly going to church. You know, living in the United States, there's still a lot of these kind of like very traditional conservative Christian values that are a bit embedded into our society. So with my drag, similarly, I feel that my drag is really pushing against and going beyond, or not even being on the same scale as everything that I was taught growing up, right? Everything that I was taught about, well, what gender is supposed to look like, you know, what's right and what's wrong, and all of these really kind of limiting beliefs that also made me really, really mentally unwell, because there was such a conflict between who I am, who I know I'm meant to be, and then who everyone else is telling me to be, right? So with my drag, I really try to center first my body and my experience and what feels good in my body before I do anything, because living with a lot of daily chronic pain and disabilities and limitations, obviously this is why I'm not with you all in person today, because I'm dealing with some pain today, you know, that makes it so that a lot of my life is informed by my body, right? Like I have to be in touch with that before I can make any decisions, before I can make any moves, before I can even get out of bed. So in that way, I try to really center a lot of my drag of like, what is going to feel good for me? What's going to bring joy? What's going to bring release or catharsis? And also what I think might feel good for other people as well.
Beautiful.
Thank you for summarizing that so eloquently. Myself, I was actually baptized Lutheran, and was, went and practiced Lutheran under the Lutheran beliefs for quite some time. And I always felt different. I felt that I didn't really fit in this box of that religious context I felt put me in. And so for me, it was really important to continue to explore my spirituality outside of the religious context. And in that, I also had a privilege to be upbrought by someone who identifies as being a psychic. And so with that, found myself amongst a lot of psychic communities, dealing with a lot of meditations and alternative ways to tune into spirituality. And so doing a lot of meditations, working with things like archangels and light, and looking at those constructs is really what really formed my spirituality. It really helps grasp my belief of who I am, especially with spirituality, how the spirit enters the body, and how we are created, and my own personal belief with that. Because my belief is that we're all kind of, our soul is neutral. And then once we enter our physical vessel, AKA the body, we start to formulate our identities. And those identities can be subconscious or conscious. And in those subconscious realms, there may be femininity or masculinity and things like that help protect us and help formulate our egos and our super egos and our ids. With that being said, that spirituality for me is really about entering my physical space. And so whenever I'm translating it to drag performance, I'm really looking internally and seeing what's aligning with my spirit, and how I'm going to express that. What is the message I would like to send to the world through my performance or through my messaging, and hope that it resonates and that I piecemeal that together in the way that I would like, so that way I can actually get that message across.
Thanks for sharing, Todd.
Absolutely. It's Lotus, you mentioned a lot about listening to your body. And I think that's extremely important. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with your body and how you've gotten to the point where you are listening to it?
Sure. What a big question. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, I will first start off by saying that I am not exactly where I want to be. It's always a practice and a learning, right? And an unlearning, because so much of Western medical industrial complex, or like Western medicine and culture, I think really encourages us to not listen to our bodies, right? The way that we look at just medicine. It's you go to the doctor, you have a headache, and you get a pill for that headache, but you don't look at, well, is my back hurting, or am I stressed out, or did I not eat anything today, right? So it's when we say it like that, it's like, oh, well, duh, of course, that could be contributing to my headache. But we are kind of taught to look at everything as separate, right? And I think that idea, right, is also very present in that, even like spirituality, right, wise, that we are all separate from each other. We're so different, but really we are all one, right? We're all part of the same essence and fabric of everything in the universe. And I think that once we start to think differently about just our relationship to our bodies, and like this idea of like wellness or feeling good, is where there really is the opportunity for change, right? For doing something different than what, we're taught to do, or what the doctor says to do. Of course, listen to your doctors if you need that. But, and of course, I also have many different doctors and I take medication daily. So I'm not like fully shitting on Western medicine here, but I think, ideologically, it's been a practice. It's definitely, I will be honest and say, it took me many, many years of my life to actually take that seriously, that connection to my body, which I also feel is intuition, is part of that. The practice of like the deep knowing, right? The knowing without questioning that something is, and that something feels safe and good for you, and aligned with your values as well. And for the majority of my life, I would say I actively did not listen to my body because of the amount of pain that I'm in on a daily basis. Sometimes it's just so much that you have to just tune it out, right? But then when you're tuning out the pain, that tunes out so many other things. It makes it so much harder to connect with your emotions, to connect with, other like basic needs like hunger or thirst or tiredness. So I kind of got to a point when I was in college, undergraduate, where my physical health was at its worst point. I ended up having to miss a whole week of classes because I just was so debilitated at not listening to my body. I was working 3 jobs at the time while also being a student. So clearly just doing a lot of things that obviously were not sustainable for me and I actually couldn't be doing, but because of ableism, internalized ableism, because of, capitalism and needing to survive, I was just going through the motions, right, of what is expected for me. And I got to that point, and it actually took me refinding acupuncture and just taking that, deep dive into it, which the first time I had an acupuncture session, it completely changed my life. And I had never experienced like such a drastic decrease in my pain, my anxiety, and everything. So that was back in 2016, I think. And since then I realized how much I actively don't listen to my body. And it's a process, right? Because it involves sitting with uncomfortability. And I think that a lot of our culture, and it's oftentimes the way that certain religions or spirituality can be used, is antithetical to what, for me, spirituality is about. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, I think, use organized religion and even kind of like the new age spirituality to avoid certain uncomfortable feelings, right? Because it's all about, well, what can I like? So I'll speak from the perspective of Christianity, right? Well, here's these rules. Here's the 10 commandments. Here's, what we should do to be a good Christian. And doing that makes you feel better about yourself, right? Or doing that makes you feel better about the harms and the pains and like, the former sins you've committed. When it's really not about that at all. Or, looking at like, okay, well, new age spirituality is, a conglomerate of all these different bits and pieces from different spiritualities and religions. So it's like, oh, here's, this meditation, which I love meditation. I find a lot of benefit from it. But I think a lot of people look at these really sacred tools and just look at it as like the way they look at a pill, right? It's like, oh, well, if I can just meditate enough, then I'll be healed. Or if I could just, take this go to this yoga retreat, or go to this, take this one supplement, take this crystal, and then that's going to solve all my issues. But for me, spirituality is really an embodiment practice, right? It's about coming back to yourself. And I really liked what you said, Todd, about like also checking in with your spirit, right? And kind of like, for me, you know, you can't check in with your spirit if your body isn't feeling good or if it isn't feeling open and accessible. So yeah, all that to say, it's still a practice. I sometimes I still have to kind of ignore certain things from my body and really kind of take it moment by moment. But for me, that's the way you get closer to your true self and kind of like your essence and your highest self, whatever language you want to use, is always going back to what you know and what no one else can take from you, which is your connection to your body.
I absolutely have to agree with that. And it's interesting that you mentioned pain, because, you know, it's thinking about pain and how it's such a physical response, and it is a potent messenger to a lot of individuals. You know, it's your body saying, hey, there's something going on here. Listen to me. And so it's interesting. And you talk about like Western society, how we're so quick to mask that pain by just taking a pill and not listening to those deeper connotations of what's going on. What is the root cause of this pain? And it's interesting to think about, you know, pain and how limiting it can be for the spirit. It can almost impede on your ability to think. And so it's interesting that I really enjoy that you mentioned bringing the space of your body forward before you can even engage with your spirit, because your body has to be in a specific state. Cotton, what are your thoughts on pain, and how has that limited you? And what techniques have you used to overcome that through your drag?
Yeah, with me, just, you know, having to deal with an injury that just happened one day. You know, your life is not perfectly fine, but you're able to walk one day and the next day you might not be able to. And so you have to learn. My biggest skill was taking help and asking for help, because that could be a really hard thing that we have to do in our lives. And especially if you have an art practice, or if you have anything else going on in your life and you still want things to function, yet you physically can't be there. Sometimes you have to reach out to your community, or your community wants to reach out to you, and it's taking that hand and being able to take that help. Luckily, I know not everybody has that. So that's why it is important to get yourself out there in the community, because there are people that need your help if you have the time and the ability to be there for that. Also, just learning how to move my body differently. Like Lotus was saying, you know, it is an ongoing lesson of listening to your body. With me, it was knowing that I deserve to get better. I don't need to be, if I can help myself a little bit more so that I can walk, I deserve to go to that PT appointment. I deserve to take that hour for myself. That was a lot harder for me than I thought it would be, because even sometimes taking a bath, taking a shower, getting up and doing something for yourself that day can be really hard. So not only like knowing that, one, I deserve to do the things with my body to help me get better and not let those anxieties win. Sometimes they do. And, you know, whether it be your pain tolerance, or whether it be your mental state, because you're in so much pain of, I don't even want to move. I don't want to do the exercises so that I can walk today. I don't have it in me. And beating that, because like, hey, I have a show, or hey, I have an emotional responsibility that I've given myself to make other people happy. So I've got to make myself happy first. Then I got to do the practices so that I can walk and then move on. So I don't like, even getting through the pain, you have to take care of yourself first. And even being able to learn how to take care of yourself first is a whole process. Because sometimes we just, you know, either want to take a pill, and if that pill doesn't work, then we want to give up. But having patience with yourself and practicing that patience and giving yourself and your body grace. You know, we are just little science projects, like walking around. So, you know, it's important to really evaluate of what's going on. Like, I've got there's a bubbling thing going here. Why is it bubbling? You know, so, or, you know, this part of my body is hurting, and why is it hurting? Or I at least deserve to get it checked out and go to that doctor's appointment and do the things, go to the acupuncture appointment, and just learning how to take care of myself was the biggest thing. And knowing to take help, know that people are wanting to help you, know that if you have that in you, that you want to help others and you have that ability, go out there and do it. Believe there's so many people that would appreciate even just your time, even just talking with somebody, even just getting people's outfits together, doing their dishes, taking their dog for a walk. I really learned how to utilize my community in a very positive way. Even it helps the pain. Yes, I don't even know if I answered the question, but
You did.
yeah,
You
yeah,
did.
okay.
A few responses to that, if that's okay with y'all. Thank you for sharing, Cotton. I was a lot of what you said is very resonant to me, and I just appreciated you highlighting the realities that, you know, disabled or not, injured or not, we all need help with our lives. We are interdependent on each other, right? We cannot fall to the myth of like individualism that, oh, we all have to just work really hard by ourselves and get out of our stuff by ourselves. And with drag, you know, any drag artist will tell you that I think it's impossible. I haven't done a scientific study on this, but it's impossible to me that there's any drag artist out there who has never had help with anything, right? You know, even thinking about people, right? Even thinking about people who are like, you know, oh, I'm a seamstress, or like you know, even if they don't have a lot of help from their community, well, they had to learn that from somewhere, right? Maybe they learned that from their parents or their sibling or YouTube even, right? So I think that, yeah, when we're talking about what it means to, for me, be in community genuinely, right? It's not enough to just say like, oh yeah, we are all drag artists, you know, we've performed on the same show. It's like, okay, yeah, right, we're connected in that way, but do we actually have a deeper connection? And am I actually showing up for you and you showing up for me? And am I seeing you, right, with our full humanity and our full range of capacities? And yeah, I you know, folks who have disabilities and chronic illnesses and injuries, drag and everything is just so much more difficult a lot of the times, right? Not saying it's the worst thing in the world. You know, I'm also, there's so much beauty and pride and joy and expansiveness in fully embracing our bodies and just how they are. But it's also very hard and very painful and very exhausting sometimes. So yeah, thank you, Cotton, for kind of highlighting the importance of acknowledging the ways that our bodies are different, right? And our bodies, as drag artists, you know, our bodies are our literal instrument, right? Like, it's like when you think about other jobs, you know, maybe you have a tech job and your main tool is your computer, right? Of course, you might have back problems from being at your computer all the time, but it's a lot different being a drag artist or any other type of performer where literally we're using our bodies constantly in like all ways. So it's just so much, it takes a toll, right? And yeah, I kind of forgot where I was going with that because I also have ADHD, neurodivergence here. But the other thing I wanted to say, maybe it'll come back to me, but Cotton, I wanted to ask, and then, you know, Todd also would love to hear you jump into if you have anything, but with your Baha'i faith, Cotton, is there any, you know, concepts or experiences or kind of, you know, ways that you feel like that faith kind of really helps you in times of you know, pain, or in times of, you know, discouragement, or maybe inspires you to be in deeper community and connection with other drag artists? And then Todd, also, whenever you want to answer, would love to hear more about, you know, your connection to spirituality and kind of how that informs the way that you show up in community too.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Thank you for that. I do have to say a lot of the, at least identifying males within the Baha'i community, have always been very gentle. And that's something that I saw that was different within my upbringing versus some other upbringing. Now, whether that was just in my little community, because it wasn't very big, you know, there was maybe like 10 families. So maybe 10 men, but they all were very gentle with their families. And no matter what beliefs, because I don't know if people know, but the Baha'i faith does not believe in same-sex marriage. And that's where I kind of dropped. I was a very, very involved Baha'i until I kind of found out that information and realized that my life might not be matching up. Now, even though I don't identify as a practicing Baha'i anymore, I do have to say I still go back to prayer. Baha'is do have written out prayers that you could go back to your prayer book, and I see them more as like mantras. A lot of them are talking, it uses the word God, but it's just like saying the universe or your connection to yourself, to your spirit. And just sometimes I do go back to that prayer book of, this is how I connect. These are the words that have always, have been my mantras growing up and how to connect me back to spirit. Or this is going to sound so silly, but I was in we had a stomp dance youth workshop, and I was all about those workshops. We were performing at YMCAs and stuff. And every once in a while, if I'm feeling really nervous, especially if it's like physically in my body, I'll like bust out a move from the stop dance or just do something silly, like a little. And it's weird because I go back and I was like, wait, I've been doing this since I was little. And it is tied back to being a Baha'i kind of, but it was just because that faith put up a platform for me to be able to do those things. So it's not necessarily that that every Baha'i does certain things. And one thing about the Baha'i faith that is a really beautiful practice is that you are welcome to go and study other religions and other spiritual practices. It's very welcome, as long as you just accept Baha'u'llah and the Bab inside of your heart, then that technically makes you a Baha'i. So it's not very, other than the no same-sex marriage thing and then some other things, there really is a lot of beautiful aspects. And I'm very fortunate to have been raised in that sort of environment where we focused more on the spirit versus necessarily the laws or, we focus more on virtue than on practice. So I try to bring those virtues of, practicing Baha'is. There's what's called the obligatory prayer that you do every day, which I adapt kind of that practice to other things. It's not necessarily that I say that prayer every day, but I make sure that I go and I take my dog for a walk every day at the same time. I go and make sure that, I'm feeding him breakfast. There's little things that I grew up doing certain practices that I just adapt in a different way because I found value in it, but not necessarily might have the same thought processes as I did before, if that makes sense. I did go to Israel in 2006 and went on religious pilgrimage. And so I've been to Akka and I've been to Haifa. And here I was going on pilgrimage every day, yet going in the basement and calling my girlfriend every day at the pilgrim house. And it was like, I was so terrified, like that somebody would find me out and I'd like be kicked out and I'd be, I don't know if that's how they would react, but that fear instilled is something that you can't really explain. So every time I get on that stage, I still kind of have that fear of what if there's a Baha'i that sees me? What if my community that I loved so much and gave so much time to doesn't respect what I'm doing with my art? So that's still, and that's why I'm like, you know what? I'm still going to pray. I'm still going to be a good person because no matter what they think, I know, I'm still practicing the values that I was taught, and that what makes you a quote unquote, good Baha'i. So just taking those and be kind to me. I know we've all shared, backstage before. And to me, that's almost bigger than how you perform on stage. I know when it comes to booking, but how are you as a person? Are you going to make those people feel confident backstage? Or are you going to bring them down? Because it's really important that you build each other up. And that's one thing I love about the King community is I don't think I've been backstage with a group of Kings and we're not back there just pumping each other up. What do you need? If giving people their space, if they need their space. But yeah, just taking those virtues with me, and not necessarily so much the practices, but the things that I still adapt to and still speak with.
Thank you for sharing. So for me, I'm a ball of energy. So anyone who knows me in my immediate circles or has encountered me, I'm always going. And so it's really important to me to remain productive. I find when I'm not productive, if, say like I get a cold or ill and I'm kind of put in bed for a little while, I start to get really depressed. I always have to kind of be doing something, and that's that ADHD in me. But I have this ball of energy that exists within me and I have to burn it. So I'm constantly doing things. Which is interesting because for me, what has gotten me furthest, especially in these moments where I am self-doubting or questioning myself, I really think about my faith, and that no one can take my faith away from me. And the faith that I have is powerful, because every single person on this planet is powerful. It's just getting in tune with that power and then noticing what you're using that power towards or giving power to. And so for me, it's, having a lot of energetic power. I feel it's very important that I'm funneling it into things that are resonate or meaningful to me. And that would also serve as productive to our societies and our communities in the progression of the direction in which I want to see. So I want to be the change that I want to see in the world. And so for me, it's very important to always remain faithful to myself and the universe. I have a potent trust within the universe, and that the universe will always provide or land me where I need to go, by creating a synchronistic effect around me. And I have to trust that. I have to be okay with that and own that. And yes, sometimes it will present in what I might perceive in the moment to be a negative impact, but later down the road, it has positioned me to be something that I could never have imagined. And this much more positive encroachment starts to fill my life, because it's a give and take. And I think when the energetic world, when you're looking at positive and negative charged ions and how they come together and things like that, create neutrality, it's really important that, not everything is always going to be sunshine and rainbows and positive, that there, you also have to take the negatives with it, because it's part of the trade. It's part of keeping you in this homeostatic balance with your physical realm, essentially. And so for me, it's really important to make sure that I remain tapped into that, especially because I'm putting myself out there for so many human beings all the time. And so whether I'm performing in drag or out of drag, I'm always trying to funnel myself into the advancement, whether it be through philanthropy. It's hard for me to say certain words because I do have a little bit of dyslexia, or showing up to support others. Those are really important things, because my drag doesn't stop when I'm out of drag, if that makes sense. There's a mission. And so one of the things that I've done is really learn my internal mission as Todd Hottie. And I don't deviate. Once I formulated that internal mission, I don't deviate from that mission. And everything that I do through Todd is in alliance with that. And if it doesn't align with that mission, then I probably won't engage with that construct, whatever it is. One of the things you mentioned, Lotus, is being alone. And, I completely agree with you that we are all so interdependent on one another. And there's really only three things I believe that connect everyone on this planet. And it's tribes, artifacts, and language. And that's why language is so important. That's why we give power to things, but also our community. I wouldn't exist if you didn't exist, and vice versa. And so it's very important to understand that. And in fact, they've studied this. I know Stanford had studied this. The failure to thrive is real. Individuals or Homo sapiens, when they're left alone, will die because they lack the human interaction. And in fact, there's other studies, it's called the blue zones, in which they find the humans, the centurions. They study the centurions who have lived the longest, who have the most cohorted individuals over the age of 100 years old. And a lot of them demonstrate simplicity in their life, routines like Cotton had mentioned, but also social responsibility to one another. And and that's why I think peer support is so important, because you truly are not meant to be alone. It's important to practice self-reliance, because you really do have to show up and brush your own teeth and do things like that. But for the most part, just know that it's really important to ask for help when you need it. We talk a lot about limitations. We talked about physical limitations with our bodies. And I was wanting to talk about maybe a little bit about boundaries, talk about, physically being limited to do something, but what boundaries have y'all set in drag? What are you willing to give the stage or your audience, or what have you set forth?
That is a really big question. I don't know which way to.
I mean, I could start if you want. I know, like for me,
Go ahead.
I know a lot of individuals like to, completely undress on stage down to a thong or whatnot, and totally fine. But one of my boundaries is that I'm not that kind of king. So I'm really, I find that I don't want to express that part of my body to the world. I'm also married, and I have a sacred agreement with my wife in that we share specific things only amongst with each other because we believe in monogamy. And so because of that, because we are monogamous and married, and I believe that my body, there's certain parts of my body that are to remain sacred for that marriage. Would that change if I was married? Maybe. I think the beautiful thing about boundaries and life and being an artist is that everything's on a spectrum. I think everything's spectral. So just because you believe one way or think a certain way now does not mean that it's subject to change. And I think it's important to be open to that. But you also have to know yourself in order to make those decisions if you choose to change. And so I think that's part of one of my boundaries is knowing that about me. What about you, Cotton?
I think I'm still figuring it out. Honestly, I've been performing for a long time, but I've only been doing drag for 2 years. And certain performances, I'm like, you know what, this vibe, let's take the shirt off. And there's some performances where I'm like, I want to put more clothes on if I can, just because that's how I'm feeling today. So there's some times where I'm a Gemini and I love attention and I want a lot of it. And then there's some times where I'm reclusive. I'm single. So that whole part I haven't even thought about in years. But when it comes to sharing my body, it is important to think about what you do want to present and what boundaries you do want to set, because there has been times where I open it up and people kind of take advantage of that. And there is a responsibility, I think, between the audience and the performers and the whole community of making sure that people are respected. And in the very, very least. I mean, I made just a little joke about it of, please knock on your refrigerator before you open it up because there might be a salad dressing. But please just be polite. It's not that hard.
Consent is sexy.
Consent is a thing. Exactly. Whether it's opening up a door, whether you're going to touch during performance. And what I want to actually ask Lotus too, on top of this question, is where do you think the responsibility lies for that communication? Is it like per show? Is it something that like maybe the community should just know? Is there something that we should like put out of? Because I know that there is even the atmosphere for say like when I had my residency at the Hard Rock Casino, they wanted it rough and hard and half naked. And to be rubbing up on everybody. But it's like, maybe I don't want to give myself that way. Or maybe the audience doesn't even want me in their face. But that's what the vibe of the show is. And that's something I've kind of been not struggling with, but just questioning of like, okay, where do I put this in my script of when I'm talking about it? I always add a joke like consent is sexy, that kind of thing. But how do you handle that in shows and setting your boundaries and sticking to them and that sort of thing?
Yeah, what a big question. And it's really important. This is actually something that I'm been talking about with a lot of other drag artists as well, and have done a few different performances where I know that y'all have seen the number where I'm pretty explicit about just calling out the fact that patriarchy and white supremacist values of kind of entitlement to people's bodies, especially people of color, especially women, femme people who were assigned female at birth or socialized as women. I think we often experience a lot more of our boundaries being pushed or completely just obliterated. That's a big question for one person to answer about where the responsibility lies, but it starts with you, right? I mean, it's basic respect and seeing someone as a full person, and then like and acknowledging that no matter what I'm doing with my body, no matter what the fuck my body looks like, that doesn't give you the right to violate my consent or my boundaries, right? Just like we talked about, just because someone is maybe doing a half naked dance or stripping and whatnot, like that's not an invitation to touch someone, make a move on them. And I think it's something that really needs to be reminded a lot more, because a lot of drag happens in spaces where alcohol is present, where alcohol is very promoted. And as someone who, I don't drink, it's fine if other people do, but the most times that I have been assaulted by audience members and even other drag community members too, it's been where there's been a lot of alcohol involved. And, it's just as simple as asking questions, right? Like, can I give you a hug even? I think hugs are really normalized in our culture nowadays. And first of all, we're still in a pandemic. So like, we should not be just like hugging people willy-nilly without masks on, unless unless that person and you're have, that familiarity and you have agreed to hug each other in that way. But I think there's just really a disconnect, like a cognitive dissonance in a lot of people's minds. Like, for example, I did the number that I have that's about consent and not touching performers and respecting bodily autonomy. And immediately after that, I had 2 different audience members come up and just come in for a hug that I've never met before, never talked to them in my life. And I had to very clearly, literally had to do one of these and say, whoa, could you please ask first? And then, of course, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just really love the number. And I'm like, did you even watch it? Right? It's like the number was so clear about asking for consent, for any sort of touch. So for me, I think that's going to be the constant work that we have to do to remind each other and to constantly assert our boundaries in a world that normalizes violence, right? Even it's as simple as, even again, in the grand scheme of things, you may be listening to me and be like, oh, it's just a hug, like whatever. Sure, a hug maybe compared to other violations of consent doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but that's where it starts, right? Because if we normalize these small interactions happening without a dialogue or a check-in, that's how it makes other things okay. So, for me, it's just, I'm a survivor of multiple sexual assaults, of a physical assault, an attempted murder. And, I do have a lot of triggers sometimes around being physically touched. I'm very grateful that I've had many years of therapy to help me kind of get to a place where I'm generally grounded, but you just never know. And you never know with anyone else, right? You never know what someone is holding in their body, right? And in their spirit. So that's why it's so important to just ask and have conversations and check in with people. It's just like asking someone's pronouns, right? You don't want to assume that. And you also don't want to assume that someone's body is just yours to do what you want, or even like making a comment, right, on someone's body. Sometimes that's not what someone wants, right? Even if it's a positive comment, because it can feel objectifying or uncomfortable. So yeah, ultimately, I think that it is hard because, it's tiring. It's tiring to say the same thing over and over again. Like, don't fucking touch me. Don't fucking touch me. Please don't touch me. Right. And, sometimes you just have to say it in different ways, but I think that's part of the work, right? Like, in capital THW, right? The work, the general work that we're all doing to unlearn violence, unlearn inherited ideas around like systemic oppression, and unlearn these things that keep us really unwell and trapped and limited. And I think that our ideas around consent is one of those as well, that really makes things not comfortable and safe for everyone.
Thank you for answering that loaded question so well.
Of course.
Todd, can you explain some of your journeys that you went through to help you come to an understanding of how your body and how your spirit merged to help make Todd's magic happen?
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm non-binary, so my pronouns are they, them. And, born, my sex sign of birth is female. And so growing up, and, before I answer this question, I just need to go back to Lotus really quick, because I think it's really important to understand generational traumas and how they encroach and impact your day-to-day life. And a lot of people are not even aware of generational traumas. And so I think it's really important to understand the root of why you're doing things. Why did I just do that? Why did I react this way, etc.? Because you'll start to find out those triggering events that are deep within your soul, which it sounds like, Lotus, you've done a lot of exploration and have identified numerous of those triggers, including touch being one of them, because of the traumas you invoked it. And I have to commend you for that, because that's hard to do. And a lot of people don't even realize that's possible to do. But I just want you to know, if you're listening, you have the power to do that as well. We all do. So you're not alone. Ask for help. To answer your question, getting I was kind of formed into, you can kind of grow up in who you want to be. So I was really I never wanted to wear a dress as a child, even though I was placed into a dress. And as soon as I was I don't want to wear dresses anymore, my parents were like, no, you don't have to wear dresses anymore. And that was really nice of them. A lot of people don't have that upbringing where they have that openness with their parents, and their parents allow things like that because of our societal constructs and religious context, et cetera, that have been going on. It's systemic for years. But the point that when I was able to become a tomboy is the terminology that I would like to use. I grew up a tomboy, and there was times where me and my sister wanted a men's haircut, which would be perceived as a men's haircut. But I remember going into the men's bathroom with my sister, so she didn't have to go alone, because we'd get kicked out of the women's bathroom. My mom would get chewed out for bringing her son into a men's bathroom, even though it wasn't a son. And so it was really interesting at that time of just learning gender identity and learning who I was as a person, and then my spirit. I lost my twin in embryo. My mom miscarried my twin, and I think part of me and the way that I construct my spirit is that twin is still with me, but inside of me. We just had two spirits that kind of combined it into one body. And so it may give me some answer or reasoning behind why I feel this duality inside of me, of androgyny. I also have a belief that the spirit is made of masculine and feminine energies, and that's often recognized in a lot of religious or spiritual contexts. You have the yin and the yang, the Shiva and the Shakti. There's a lot of that polarity to that. And I think it creates balance. And so having that balance inside, I have a belief that we all have femininity and masculinity within us all. It's just what kind of balance is it coming in at? Are you more feminine one day? Do you present more feminine? Do you feel more feminine, even though you have a little bit? Or are you 75% masculine and 25% feminine? Does that change? Does it shift? Is it equal, etc.? And so it kind of helps me conceptualize how balanced I am inside being a non-binary individual. And then how do I present that to the world? Because I'm very comfortable in my womanhood, in my body, and I enjoy my woman body. But I also enjoy Todd's body too. And I love Todd's body as well. In fact, I wear a chest piece, and I have a male presenting body right now that I feel over time I become one with. I feel very it's part of me now. Even though it may not be my physical tissue. It still is very much a part of me and how I present and how I act. And it's a part of my character and my persona and my being. And so one of the things that helped my journey and my alliance with who I am too is actually putting on the bodysuit. It was actually the first time I experienced dysmorphia when looking at myself. Because I was so used to seeing my body as a woman that when I did see it in a male presenting fashion, I was like, whoa. And that reflection really shed a lot of instruction on what it means to not be born or aligned with your gender, not be born aligned with yourself. And so you're born in a specific body that may not be who you are or represent who you are. And the journey it takes to get into your physical self, especially in a physical realm that has been created by us, and where we are now with it, is quite it's testament. There's a lot of work that goes into transitioning, and just acknowledging or even accepting yourself to open the doors for that, to allow that transition, whether it be socially, medically, legally, etc. So for me, understanding my spirit in the non-binary plane, understanding my neutrality and spirituality and the balance of femininity and masculinity, and then coming to terms with that within my body is really how I kind of constructed my drag persona, and it's brought out Todd. And now here I am, Todd. I started doing drag in 2006, and at that time there was a group of kings. We couldn't find a lot of queens even. RuPaul didn't hit the airwaves till about 2009, I believe. And so back then when I was doing it, there was a lot in the community that I was in. There wasn't much drag, and so being able to hold that stage and show myself also gave me a lot of self-empowerment as well. And that was magic.
Lotus, do you have a certain story in particular that you can think of that really made you take a different step or level up in your drag, or make you really realize that you wanted to pursue this like seriously?
Let me think about that for a second. And thank you, Todd, for sharing all of that, and some very powerful life events and kind of connections to your body and your spirit and kind of your history. I can see really come through into who you are today. I really appreciate you sharing that. I guess I would have to say, there's been several moments, but the one that's sticking out to me is when I was first booked for Oaklash, and then eventually was accepted to host a panel specifically called Drag and Disability, where I was able to highlight 4 different disabled and or chronically ill and or neurodivergent QT BIPOC drag artists. And this was all virtual because it was in 2021. So, we were still doing virtual events due to the pandemic fully. And at that time, even though I've had a chronic illness and physical mobility limitations and a lot of things since I was 13, I wasn't yet fully out as disabled, right? Which, ideologically, I don't believe that's something we need to do, but because of the way the world is right now, we have to, right? We won't get any of our basic needs met and our accommodations met if we don't out ourselves. Often if we live with invisible disabilities, which I do. And I have had this chronic illness, and then I also had a really bad injury as well. I fractured my tailbone, also doing drag, and that just really impacted my life. Like, I was bedridden for almost 6 months and couldn't drive for a while, could barely sit up. And, that injury, even though that happened in 2021, it still hurts me and still affects me to this day. And, it really impacted the way I do drag, my capacity, right? For I don't even often have the ability to perform as many times as I'd like to, or as many, sometimes, I'm blessed to get gig offerings, but sometimes I have to say no because I need to be in bed, right? So for me, one, getting booked at Oaklash, which is the Bay Area's drag festival, shout out to them for really, centering accessibility in all that they do. Full disclosure, I'm also on the board of directors for Oaklash now, which has been such a blessing. And I'm not trying to plug it just for that, but it was a big honor and deal to me to get booked in that way, because I only started drag in 2018 and really didn't, I think, acquire a lot of the skills that I really use now in my day-to-day performances and art until 2020, until I had that time to, after unfortunately losing one of my jobs, I had that time to actually focus on myself and go inward and connect to my body, even though it was painful, even though there were so many days where, after that injury, my mental health was in a very low place. And I really was kind of thinking like, wow, this is it. This is a sign that I need to stop drag because I just can't, or I need to really think about a different life path. And that was really difficult for me to consider. But, thankfully with like physical therapy, with mental health therapy, with the support of my ESA Jasper, who has been my ESA for 13 years. He's right here. Had to shout him out, of course. But yeah, and then being given that really, that was the first time I was given a platform, I think, in the Bay Area drag community and wider drag community, since it was, streamed, to be like, hey, disabled drag artists exist, because that was another reason why I didn't come out or wasn't as open with my needs, really, right? It's like I don't actually need to tell you that I'm disabled for you to just respect what I'm asking for, right? For you to just tell me, are there stairs at this stage? Is there disabled parking, right? Like I don't have the energy, right, to like fully explain my diagnosis to every single venue or every single person. And it's important, right? Because a lot of people who are able-bodied or neurotypical, don't think about these things. And, that's not a judgment value, but it's like your lived experience is just so much different, right, than mine. So I'm not going to fault you for not knowing necessarily to ask about these things or to give me this access information. There's also a part of me that's like, you could be doing this by now. Google is free. That's the name of one of my songs, but I don't promote Google. I'm not sponsored by them. Google also has given a lot of money to the Israeli army. So, and Israel in general. And I don't, I'm trying to be very more critical with, the things that I'm using in my drag, even if I'm not sponsored by Google, even if it's more of like it's about the message of using your resources and your privileges, right, to better yourself and to learn about other people, right? That's what the message of Google is free is like, hey, before you ask someone a question that you could easily Google, take that time to look at yourself and be like, well, what can I do, right? Like, why do I feel like, this person owes me this explanation? So yeah, I think being able to curate that panel was really powerful for me. And also as a showcase too. So we got to showcase pre-recorded works by these digital drag disabled QT-POC artists who did work specifically about their experiences with disability. So, we don't often get that space either, because oftentimes, because of ableism and because of people's kind of like avoidance or taking things personally, sometimes people don't want to hear it, because it's like people think that just talking about racism or just talking about ableism or sexism or any of the isms is like an attack on them, right? And it's like, no, this is attack on the structures and a invitation to see where you're complicit in these ideologies, right? Or in these normalizations. Like, I know not one person is responsible for racism or ableism, but there's so many little things we can do to change our mindsets, to make little differences, right? Like making sure, if you're a show producer, that you have all the accessibility information ready to go, or just whenever you're booking someone, just tell them that information up front, because you never know, like Cotton said, right? You can be injured the next day and become disabled, and maybe you'll be not disabled in a few years, right? Disability is also dynamic and changing, just like everything else, just like gender, sexuality, just like our spirituality and our faith. It changes depending on, whatever in the moment. So it's really important to be open to that and to just think about how can I do things differently to make the community, the world, and ourselves a bit better and lighter.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I wanted to thank you for that. I mean, I think it's really important. I think one of the most important things about drag is that it represents every single person or every single transection on this planet. We're everyone, we're all out there, we're all doing it, and we all come from extreme different backgrounds, different religions, different upbringings, the socioeconomics, different education levels. I mean, we're all different, and that's what makes us each powerful and beautiful. And so I want to thank you for your time today, joining us on this panel about our body and our spirits. And I will just end you with Todd's favorite saying, in that you got to love the many versions of yourself so you can love others.
Agreed. Thank you, Todd. And thanks for you both for being in conversation with me and sharing about yourselves. And I appreciated this space, and I loved what you just said, Todd, that, you know, it's really about, it's not just about you, it's about us and we and all of us together, and seeing how we are connected. And that's never going to change, but we can change ourselves.
Yes, celebrate the diversity.
Yeah, and don't be scared to have those, you know, maybe uncomfortable conversations, because it can lead to beautiful things.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time today. Thank you, Cotton.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.